Roberto, walk me through, how did Republicans, congressional Republicans, take the president's speech? Because they're all about to have lunch today.
They are about to have lunch, and Stephanie, it's key to watch the moderate Republican senators, those who are up for re-election in 2020, like Senator Collins or Senator Gardner of Colorado, Senator Murkowski of Alaska, saying it's time to make a deal. Senate Republicans are different than House Republicans. You have, and not just in terms of the chamber they're in, but their whole personality, the way they approach politics. The Freedom Caucus element dominates the House GOP. In the Senate, it's much more of a centrist body, at least in terms of its governing tactics. When I was up at the Capitol in the last few days, there's a real appetite to get this over with, to move on, and we'll see if they make that clear to the president.
Okay, Ron, I want to read for you a quote from the president's own book, The Art of the Deal. The worst thing you can possibly do in a deal is seem desperate to make it. That makes the other guy smell blood, and then you're dead. The best thing you can do is deal from strength and leverage. That is the biggest strength you can have. So help me understand, where's his leverage point right now?
I don't think he has much. I mean, the one leverage point he has is to declare a national emergency, which could be legally dubious. It would certainly be challenged in the courts if he were to do that, and saying that we're on the cusp of some sort of national security crisis at the border, which I don't think any intelligence, anyone in the intelligence community has come out and said that. So I don't know that he has leverage, Steph, insofar as he's lost the House. He couldn't get this through when Republicans were fully in control. And I don't know what deal he cuts that would satisfy him and his base absent a wall. So I don't know that the president's dealing from strength. And I think the fact that he shifted the point of his speech last night to a humanitarian crisis from a national security crisis was also a certain sign of negotiating weakness. Because
but he
putting
also
up a
said
wall,
that they're going to make it steel at the Democrats' request, and there has been no Democrat request.
But I mean, arguing that you're going to use a wall to solve a humanitarian crisis and then completely ignoring all the terrorist statistics that were thrown out in the last week, again, is just muddling the argument, and that doesn't sound like strength. If you have a very strong argument, you get up, you make your point, you get up and you walk away. That's not something the president's doing at the moment.
Nancy Pelosi is not opening the door. She's saying this wall is nonsense, and you're not actually hearing from Mitch McConnell or many other wall. But are Democrats doing a good enough job articulating what we should do, what the plan should be? Because the president likes to push this idea, and I've heard it from Lindsey Graham, you know, the wall, it means you're pro-border security. No wall means you're open borders. And that's a lie. So has Nancy Pelosi and her party done a good enough job telling us, here's what we do propose?
I think so. And they've
Great,
also...
tell me what it is.
Well, but they've been talking about shoring up Homeland Security, including that in the budget. Even just before recess for the holidays, the Senate legislation that was approved, the bipartisan legislation that would have done all of that, I think they're making the case. But this is their clean glass next to his dirty glass, and his glass is getting dirtier and dirtier and dirtier. He blew it last night. The reason I believe he got that time from the networks is because people thought he was going to do something as dramatic as declare a national emergency, and he didn't. So, because there is no national emergency. He looked like, you know, he was reading, which you can't really read, looked like he was a hostage or something. He'll go to his base and say, you know, I was trying to be presidential, and that's what it looks like, but this is what I really mean. It is a little bit scary, though, because Republicans don't...
But do you think there was a bait and switch? Like, why would Mike Pompeo say yesterday morning, the president's going to make a lot of news tonight? He clowned himself for no reason.
Yeah, well, I think it was a bait and switch, and maybe they realized they just couldn't get away with it. You said it's legally dubious. Maybe the White House looked at it, because they were looking at the legality of it all day yesterday, and maybe they realized that they just couldn't pull off a national emergency.
I want to ask Bob about that. Bob, if the president were to go the national emergency route, how treacherous would that be? Because just yesterday I was reading David French, writing for the National Review, said it would be, quote, a serious mistake and a lawless abuse of power that would almost certainly be blocked by the courts. Do you think that's the case? I mean, if this thing were going to be blocked by the courts, talk about humiliating the president.
You don't want to predict what a federal court would do. At the same time, you know, House Democrats, who have subpoena power because they just won the House, would certainly investigate. There would probably be court challenges in federal court. How that would unfold, we'd have to see. But you could have presidential power tied up in a new way, and that these presidential wartime powers, emergency powers, could be tested in the court. And this kind of gambit could actually end up hindering the power of the presidency if a federal court rules this wasn't used in the proper way.
Set a bad precedent.
Ron, were you surprised that the president took this time to get all of the nation's attention and then didn't really give us anything else?
Yeah, and not only that, he conflated a wide, as you said at the top of the show, conflated a wide variety of statistics. I was even more surprised that the Democrats didn't have a strong enough, and I would disagree with Mark.
Can you just say that one more time?
Yeah.
He conflates facts, and then his own truly devoted base, Fox News, within seconds, gets on TV and goes, wrong, 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 not correct, Mr. President.
Yeah, the drug use and the overdose statistics were all wrong. Some of the crime statistics were wrong.
Yeah.
Again, couldn't Bill Shine have predicted that would happen?
Well, I can't get into his head. I mean, that's a tough one because he's coming out of an environment where that was actually fairly standard practice at one point. I'm also, though, I would disagree, Mark. I don't think that Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi adequately took the president to task on this 8-minute or so speech that contained no new information, that shifted gears, and that had, starkly inaccurate information. They should have been prepared to say, no, this is why we're not having a border crisis. This is why we are short on laborers in the United States. We need immigrants. Our birth rate's at a 70-year low. Our population growth rate's so low. There are a whole host of statistics suggesting that we need legal immigrants, and what was lost on everyone is the president's also pushing for a reduction in legal immigration at the same time that he's trying to reduce illegal immigration.
Ron brings up a great point that I'd love for you to comment on. We got a strong argument from Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer that the president is wrong, but they didn't clearly tell us where they're right. So for every American out there who is willing to say the wall is just a metaphor and he's trying to protect our borders, did they clearly make a case saying, no, we're tough on immigration, we want it to work for the American people, and we care about our neighbors? Did they make that clear case?
I think so. First of all, the majority of the American public is not with him. So I don't know necessarily that the burden of proof was on them to show that the wall is wrong. I think most people
the burden of
the
proof,
wall.
But it was a great opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, but
and it enhances their leverage if they have a better argument.
Well, I don't think the argument was a failing one. I think that they made the case that the government should be reopened. That is the biggest concern. That is the case right now. And also that the wall is not an answer, and even that it's immoral. They've been saying it for days now. Now, whether they said everything they said over the past week on last night, maybe not. Maybe they didn't wrap everything up in last night. But I think the point is made, and I think that he lost and he is losing.
Okay, quickly, I know we have to go. I want everyone to give them a grade. Robert Costa, you gave the president a what, and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, what'd they get?
The shutdown continues, Stephanie. I'm not here to grade. I'll just say the impasse continues.
All right, you two.
I think I'd give them both a C minus.
Trump an F, Nancy and Chuck a B.
All right, then.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.